Arizona Territory, 1873. A land where ancestral legacies ran as deep as canyon riverbeds, and foreign nobility walked among common settlers unrecognized. Where forgotten bloodlines and sacred prophecies converged in the harshest landscapes imaginable. For 19-year-old Charlotte Blackwood, the rugged plateaus of the Arizona desert represented escape, a chance to shed the suffocating expectations of Boston society and reinvent herself in a territory where history was still being written. The Prescott-bound wagon train, 24 travelers united by dreams of silver mines and cattle fortunes, had welcomed the mysterious young woman despite her vague explanations and solitary nature. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. No one could have anticipated the blood-soaked dawn that awaited them in the shadow of Granite Mountain, or how Charlotte's carefully guarded secrets would ultimately determine the fate of two worlds colliding on the untamed frontier. The morning frost painted delicate patterns across the wagon canvas as Charlotte gathered kindling near the perimeter of their camp. Dawn had barely broken, the sky transitioning from midnight blue to pale amber, promising another clear autumn day in the high desert. The wagons stood in their customary circle, a fragile barrier between civilization and wilderness. Most travelers remained asleep after the previous day's difficult passage through a rocky mountain pass. Only old Mr. Holloway, the train's scout, maintained vigilance from his perch atop a nearby boulder, Winchester rifle balanced across his knees as he surveyed the surrounding terrain. Charlotte's gloved hands moved methodically, gathering dry, mesquite branches for the morning fire. Her mind wandered to the leather-bound journal hidden beneath her bedroll, pages filled with coded entries documenting her journey westward and the circumstances that had driven her from her family's beacon. Hill Mansion 3 months earlier. "Good kindling there, Miss Blackwood," Mr. Holloway called softly, his leathery face crinkling with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Reynolds will be starting breakfast soon. Biscuits today, if we're fortunate." Charlotte nodded, gathering her bundle. At 19, she had quickly learned to make herself useful within the small community of travelers. 3 months on the trail had transformed her from a sheltered society daughter into someone accustomed to the daily labors of frontier travel, hauling water, mending torn canvas, preserving perishable foods, and finding beauty in desolate landscapes that would have terrified her former self. The first rifle shot shattered the dawn's tranquility like lightning striking dry timber. Charlotte instinctively dropped to the ground, kindling scattering as she pressed herself flat against the earth. More shots followed in rapid succession, then screams, high, terrified wails that sent ice through her blood. Through the scrub brush, she could see riders charging into the wagon circle. At least 12 men with bandanas pulled over their faces, firing indiscriminately into the unprepared camp. Mr. Holloway managed one defensive shot before a bullet struck him squarely in the chest, the old scout crumpling from his perch without. Another sound. The Reynolds family scrambled from their wagon, Mr. Reynolds pushing his wife and 3 children toward a ravine behind them. A rider spotted them, wheeled his horse around, and fired repeatedly. All 5 collapsed in a terrible heap, their nightclothes rapidly staining crimson in the strengthening dawn light. Charlotte remained motionless, one hand covering her mouth to stifle her horrified gasps. She was 60 yards from the nearest wagon, concealed in the desert brush that bordered their campsite. The massacre unfolded with horrific clarity. Mrs. Lancaster dragged screaming from beneath her wagon. The Wilson brothers gunned down as they reached for their shotguns, an infant wailing until its cries were suddenly, sickeningly silenced. The raiders moved with practiced efficiency, killing first, then methodically looting. They took only valuables easily transported, money, jewelry, weapons. They didn't bother with food supplies or personal effects. This wasn't desperate survival. It was calculated predation, "Check the perimeter," a deep voice commanded from beneath a black bandana. "Make sure we got them all." Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs as she inched backward through the brush, moving with excruciating slowness away from camp. The morning dew soaked through her skirts, the desert's lingering nighttime chill seeping into her bones. 20 yards. 40. The sounds of destruction continued behind her. When she judged herself far enough away, Charlotte risked rising to a crouch. The desert vegetation stood taller than her bent form, providing cover as she navigated toward a rock formation that lined a dry creek bed. Each step required deliberate care, her normally graceful movements now reduced to a painstaking retreat. A horse whinnied uncomfortably close. "Nothing over here, Bishop," a voice called, no more than 20 yards from where she stood, immobilized with terror. "Get back here, then. We're burning the wagons." Charlotte remained motionless until the hoofbeats receded, then continued her agonizing withdrawal toward the rocks. By the time she reached their protective shadow, black smoke billowed into the morning sky. The raiders had set fire to the wagons, erasing specific evidence of their crimes, though not the broader atrocity. From the relative safety of the rock formation, Charlotte watched as the murderers mounted up and rode eastward, their saddlebags heavy with stolen valuables. Only when they disappeared over a distant ridge did she allow herself to collapse against a boulder, her body convulsing with silent sobs. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Hours passed before she found the courage to return to what remained of the camp. The shattered wagons still smoldered, reduced to blackened frames and ash. Bodies lay where they had fallen, vacant eyes staring skyward. Charlotte moved among them like a wraith, searching desperately for anyone who might have survived. There was no one. 23 souls, men, women, children, who had shared meals and stories with her for weeks, all gone in a brutally efficient slaughter. Charlotte gathered what supplies she could salvage. A canteen half full of water, a hunting knife from beside Mr. Holloway's body, a singed blanket, a small tin of matches, and a tattered map from the scout's leather satchel. The vastness of her predicament settled over her as she stood amid the devastation. She was alone in hostile territory, at least 80 miles from the nearest settlement, according to the salvaged map. Autumn was rapidly giving way to winter in the high desert. If exposure didn't kill her, dehydration would. Or perhaps the raiders would return to ensure no witnesses remained. Yet beneath the crushing weight of circumstance, something hardened. In Charlotte Blackwood, her father's words from her childhood echoed in her mind. "Remember who you are. Remember what flows in your veins. Blackwoods do not surrender to circumstance. We master it." With her meager supplies bundled into the blanket, Charlotte studied the unfamiliar terrain. The wagon train had been following an ancient trading route that wound through the mountains toward Prescott. Logic dictated she should continue along that path. But the raiders had ridden eastward, the first place they'd look if they suspected a survivor. Charlotte turned her face northward toward a deep canyon system that cut through the plateau like a jagged wound. Her father's hunting expeditions had taught her that canyons meant water, shelter, and game, essential elements for survival. Something about those shadowed depths called to her now, not just the promise of resources, but of concealment. From those hidden passages, she might observe approaching danger before it found her. She took a final look at the charred remains of the wagon train, silently promising the dead that she would survive to tell of what happened here. Then, with the sun high overhead, Charlotte turned her face northward and began to walk. The first day passed in a fog of shock and physical strain. Charlotte forced herself to move at a measured pace, rationing sips from the canteen, gathering prickly pear fruit where she found it growing alongside animal trails. As dusk approached, she sought shelter beneath an outcropping of sandstone, wrapping herself in the salvage blanket against the desert night's bitter chill. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by nightmares of the morning's horror and the very real sounds of wildlife moving in the darkness. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries echoing off the canyon walls. Dawn brought no comfort, only the stark reality of another day of survival. Charlotte's boots, fashionable leather half-boots purchased in Boston that had already suffered from trail conditions, developed painful blisters that burst and reformed with each mile. Her small pack grew heavier as the day progressed, though it contained almost nothing. The meager rations she had salvaged would last perhaps another day, if carefully measured. Yet she pressed on, following game trails downward into the canyon. System, counting each step as a small victory against death. By the third day, Charlotte's situation had grown dire. The canteen held only a few precious swallows, though a small seep in the canyon wall had allowed her to refill it once. Food was the greater concern. She had finished her salvage supplies that morning and found little to forage in the increasingly barren landscape. Hunger gnawed at her insides, making her steps unsteady and her thoughts increasingly muddled. The weather, too, had turned against her. Dark clouds gathered over the canyon, bringing an unseasonable cold front down from the north. The first raindrops hit as Charlotte struggled along a narrow ledge. Within minutes, the drizzle became a downpour, threatening dangerous flash floods in the canyon system. Her clothes, already tattered from days of wilderness travel, offered little protection against the deluge. The blanket wrapped around her shoulders grew sodden and heavy. Her hair hung in dripping tendrils around her face, and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. "Keep moving," she commanded herself, her cultured Boston accent now rough from thirst and exposure. "Just keep moving." But toward what? The question haunted her with increasing urgency. Prescott remained days away, perhaps a week at her current pace. In her weakened state, with dwindling resources and worsening weather, the odds of reaching it diminished with each passing hour. As afternoon faded toward evening, the rain finally relented, though the skies remained threatening. Charlotte found herself in a section of canyon where the walls narrowed dramatically, creating a passage barely 10 feet wide, with sheer cliffs rising hundreds of feet on either side. The terrain ahead appeared increasingly treacherous, with fallen boulders creating obstacles that her exhausted body might not navigate successfully. A wave of dizziness washed over her. Charlotte gripped the canyon wall, waiting for it to pass. When it didn't, when in fact it intensified, a new fear took hold. Her vision began to blur at the edges, the towering canyon walls seeming to waver and dance. When the spell subsided slightly, Charlotte raised her head and studied the broken landscape ahead. Continuing blindly forward no longer seemed possible. She needed shelter, a place to recover her strength before the coming night brought even colder temperatures and the risk of flash floods. It was then that she noticed a dark shadow in the canyon wall just 30 yards ahead, a crevice or small cave that might offer protection from the elements. With renewed purpose, she forced her trembling legs to carry her forward. The opening proved to be the entrance to a small cave, no more than 12 feet deep, but blessedly dry. The floor was sandy with scattered stones, the ceiling high enough for her to stand upright. Most importantly, the entrance was partially screened by a stunted juniper, making it all but invisible from more than a few yards away. Charlotte collapsed inside, her strength completely spent. The soggy blanket offered meager protection against the cave's chill, but at least she was out of the wind and rain. She curled into herself, shivering uncontrollably, her mind clouding, with the combined effects of exhaustion, hunger, and hypothermia. "Just for tonight," she whispered, her aristocratic diction slurring from cold and fatigue. "Just rest tonight and keep moving tomorrow." But as darkness claimed the canyon and the temperature plummeted further, a new realization formed in her exhausted mind. This cave offered something she desperately needed, not just shelter for a night, but security. From its recessed entrance, she could see approaching danger without being seen. The canyon walls provided both concealment and potential food sources. Small, mammals, birds, and desert plants adapted to the harsh environment. A seep similar to the one she had discovered earlier might provide a steady, if minimal, water supply. Perhaps, she thought as consciousness began to fade, the wisest path wasn't to keep moving blindly forward, but to secure a defensible position, to build strength, to survive long enough for help to arrive or for the raiders to abandon their search, assuming they even suspected a survivor. "I'll stay," she murmured, the decision crystallizing as sleep overtook her. "Just until I'm stronger, just until it's safe." She couldn't know, as consciousness fled, that this simple decision born of desperation and instinct would shape the coming months in ways she could never have imagined. That her temporary refuge would become both sanctuary and prison. That the cave in the canyon wall would both preserve her life and slowly transform her understanding of her own identity. Or that after months of solitude, her fate would ultimately rest in the hands of a man whose ancient knowledge would unlock secrets about Charlotte Blackwood that even she had never suspected. Secrets that connected her to bloodlines and prophecies, stretching back across ocean and time. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months. Charlotte's temporary shelter had become a permanent refuge against the increasingly harsh winter conditions. Her initial panic had transformed into a rigorous routine of survival that sustained her body, while her spirit retreated deeper into itself, finding strength in memories and determination. The cave now bore the markings of extended habitation. A crude door of woven branches covered the entrance, keeping out the worst of the winter wind. Inside, a bed of dried grasses and pine needles gathered from higher elevations occupied the deepest recess. A small fire pit sat near the entrance, positioned so that the smoke would drift outward rather than filling the cave. Stacks of gathered wood lined one wall, while roots, dried berries, and strips of smoked meat, rabbit and squirrel trapped with snares fashioned from her own clothing fibers, hung from a makeshift rack. December had brought unexpected snow to the high desert, blanketing the landscape in treacherous beauty. The white expanse made travel nearly impossible, but it also granted Charlotte an unexpected advantage, the ability to spot tracks around her sanctuary. Each morning, she carefully swept away any sign of her presence and studied the area for prints that weren't her own. So far, only deer, rabbits, and the occasional mountain lion had passed near her hiding place. Of the raiders, there had been no sign since that first terrible day. Charlotte had changed in ways both visible and hidden. Her once soft hands had grown calloused from gathering firewood and crafting primitive tools. Her face, once renowned in Boston society for its delicate beauty, had thinned, revealing aristocratic cheekbones that mirrored her mother's European lineage. Her clothing, patched with rabbit fur and plant fibers, hung loosely on her frame, despite her efforts to maintain strength through careful rationing. The most profound changes, however, lay beneath the surface. The vivacious, outspoken young woman who had scandalized Boston drawing rooms with her unconventional opinions had receded into watchful silence. Even alone, she rarely spoke aloud, as if her voice itself might betray her location to unseen threats. Her movements had acquired a predator's stealth, her ears attuned to the subtlest sounds of the canyon. She had become a creature of the wilderness, more comfortable with the company of darting lizards and circling hawks than with memories of human interaction. Today marked the beginning of January, or so Charlotte calculated by the notches carved in a stick beside her bed. 3 full moons had passed since the massacre. 3 months of solitude, of walking the knife edge between survival and surrender. The morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Charlotte's breath hung visible in the air inside her cave as she carefully banked the embers of her small night fire. Winter had depleted her food stores faster than anticipated, and today she would need to venture farther than usual to check her snares and gather what meager sustenance the frozen canyon might offer. She pulled on layers of clothing, her original traveling dress, now reinforced with fur linings, covered by a crude poncho made from the salvaged blanket. Her feet were wrapped in rabbit skins inside her increasingly fragile boots. Mr. Holloway's hunting knife hung at her waist, its blade worn from constant use but still serviceable. Charlotte stepped from the cave into the brilliant morning, momentarily blinded by sunlight reflecting off fresh snow. She secured the branch door behind her, then carefully began to obscure her tracks as she moved down the canyon toward her nearest snares. The first trap was empty, disturbed by some larger predator that had stolen her potential meal. The second and third likewise yielded nothing. The fourth, set in a sheltered hollow where tender shoots still pushed through the snow, held a small jackrabbit. Charlotte whispered words of gratitude as she freed the animal from the snare and swiftly ended its suffering. The rabbit was thin, but its meat would sustain her for 2 days at least, and its fur would repair the increasingly worn lining of her makeshift gloves. She was checking her fifth and final trap when she noticed something that froze her blood. A set of tracks that didn't belong to any animal she recognized. Human tracks, moccasin prints, and they were fresh, cut clearly into the morning's new snow. Charlotte dropped to a crouch behind a boulder, her heart hammering against her ribs. For long minutes she remained motionless, scanning the canyon with the intensity of prey sensing a predator. The canyon maintained its winter stillness, giving no sign of the intruder's presence or direction. The tracks led toward a narrow side canyon where she sometimes gathered water, then continued deeper into the labyrinth of stone passageways. They weren't the boot prints worn by the raiders, but rather the distinctive imprint of handcrafted moccasins with unique patterning on the soles, the footwear of someone native to these territories. Neither possibility offered comfort. If the local tribes discovered a white woman alone in their ancestral lands, particularly after the ongoing conflicts with settlers, her fate might be sealed before she could explain herself. Charlotte backed away from the tracks, abandoning her final trap unchecked. She moved with painful caution, taking a circuitous route back to her cave, doubling back multiple times to ensure she wasn't followed. She paused frequently to listen, straining her ears for any sound that didn't belong to the natural rhythm of the canyon. By the time she reached her sanctuary, the winter sun had passed its zenith. She slipped inside, securing the door more thoroughly than usual, then retreated to the deepest shadows of the cave. Her hands trembled as she skinned the rabbit, her mind racing with newfound fear. 3 months of vigilance, and now this. It couldn't be coincidence. Someone was deliberately exploring these canyons. But why? The area held no particular resources that would draw settlers, and the local tribes typically avoided these narrow passages during winter when flash floods from sudden snowmelt posed a constant threat. That night, Charlotte didn't light her fire despite the biting cold. She wrapped herself in every layer of clothing and fur she possessed, and huddled in darkness, listening to the wind moan through the canyon outside. Sleep evaded her entirely, her mind conjuring scenarios each more terrifying than the last. The next morning brought heavy clouds and the promise of more snow. Charlotte ventured out only far enough to confirm that no fresh tracks surrounded her cave, then retreated inside to wait out the coming storm. The snowfall began mid-morning, a gentle curtain that gradually transformed into driving sheets of white. By evening, nearly a foot of fresh powder had accumulated, effectively erasing all signs of human passage from the canyon. For 3 days, the storm raged, delivering the heaviest snowfall Charlotte had witnessed since seeking refuge in the canyon. When the skies finally cleared, the landscape had been transformed into an alien terrain of deep drifts and buried landmarks. Moving through this new topography would be exhausting and dangerous. But it also granted a temporary reprieve from discovery. No one, regardless of their tracking skill, could follow her now buried trail. Nevertheless, Charlotte redoubled her precautions. She ventured from the cave only when absolutely necessary, abandoned her more distant snares, and gathered water from a small seep inside a rock crevice, rather than visiting the main stream that ran through the canyon floor. For 2 weeks, she detected nothing unusual. The moccasin prints remained buried beneath layers of snow and ice, and no new tracks appeared in the vicinity of her shelter. Gradually, Charlotte began to extend her movements again, driven by the increasing scarcity of food in her immediate surroundings. It was during one such foray, nearly 3 weeks after spotting the mysterious tracks, that disaster struck. Charlotte had ventured to a south-facing slope, where early sunlight had exposed patches of ground, and the first tender shoots of early spring growth pushed through the soil. She was gathering these precious greens, her attention focused downward, when a sound stopped her heart, the unmistakable snap of a twig beneath a heavy foot. Charlotte froze, her fingers still wrapped around a handful of shoots. Slowly, without moving her head, she shifted her gaze upward, scanning the canyon in the direction of the sound. At first, she saw nothing but rock formations and lingering patches of snow. Then a shadow detached itself from the deeper shadows of a narrow side passage, a tall figure standing utterly motionless, watching her with the stillness of a mountain lion assessing its prey. The figure was clearly a man, broad-shouldered and imposing despite his advanced age, evident in the silver hair that hung in 2 long braids, adorned with feathers and small carved beads. He wore buckskins and a fur-lined cloak against the winter cold, with elaborate beadwork decorating the chest piece of his garment. His copper skin and distinctive clothing identified him immediately as one of the indigenous people who had inhabited these canyons long before white settlers arrived. Their eyes met across 40 yards of canyon floor. Charlotte's instinct screamed at her to run, but experience had taught her the futility of flight. She wouldn't outpace a native hunter on his home terrain. Instead, she slowly rose to her full height, Mr. Holloway's hunting knife now gripped in her right hand, her eyes never leaving the watcher's face. For a long moment neither moved. They remained locked in mutual assessment, prey and predator, survivor and discoverer, woman and man. Yet something in the elder's posture suggested he was as surprised by the encounter as she was. "I bring no harm, daughter of the Eagle Star," the man called in accented but clear English, his deep voice carrying easily across the distance between them. "You are far from your rightful place in this world." Charlotte remained silent, her knife held before her, in what she knew was a pathetic defense. The elder's words confused her. Daughter of the Eagle Star? Was that some tribal term for white women? Her eyes darted briefly to the surrounding canyon, calculating possible escape. "Brutes. There are worse dangers in these canyons than an old medicine man," he continued, making no move to approach her. "I have followed your trail for many days. You hide well for one not born to the people." "Leave me alone," Charlotte finally responded, her voice rough from disuse, barely above a whisper. "I don't need help." A trace of something, perhaps amusement, perhaps respect, flickered across the elder's weathered features. "Your snares are empty. Your clothing thins. Winter lingers long in high country." He gestured toward the northern horizon. "Storm approaches. 3 days of snow and wind. Alone you may not survive it." As if summoned by his words, Charlotte noticed the dark bank of clouds building in the distance. Another storm system, perhaps even more severe than the last. Her food stores were critically low, her firewood nearly depleted. She had planned to spend the day gathering both. The elder seemed to read her thoughts. "I make camp in the sacred cave beyond the 3-peaked ridge. Food, fire, shelter," He paused, then added with surprising gentleness, "No harm will come to you there." "Why would you help me?" Charlotte demanded, her voice stronger now, edged with the suspicion that had kept her alive for months. "I have seen you in my medicine dreams," the elder replied simply. "The woman who walks between worlds, carrying old blood in new lands, the one the ancestors have spoken of." The statement struck Charlotte with unexpected force. This strange talk of dreams and ancestors, was it merely the superstition Boston missionaries had described in their fundraising lectures? Or could this elderly native somehow sense the secrets she herself had been running from when she joined the wagon train? Before she could respond, a distant sound reached them both. The faint but distinctive crack of a rifle shot echoing across the canyon from the eastern approaches. The elder's head turned sharply toward the noise, his body tensing visibly. "Bad men hunt these canyons," he said, his voice lower, more urgent. "Men who take what is not theirs, who kill without honor or need." He looked back at Charlotte, his dark eyes intense. "Same men who attacked your wagon people." A cold that had nothing to do with the winter air seeped into Charlotte's bones. The raiders. They had returned to the territory. "How do you know about that?" she asked, her knife hand trembling slightly. "Found burnt wagons when snow first fell. Found bodies." His expression revealed a controlled anger. "Found sign of men who kill for pleasure and profit, not need." Charlotte's mind raced. If the elder had found the massacre site, he knew far more about her than she had realized. Yet he had made no attempt to capture or harm her during the weeks he'd apparently been tracking her movements. "Who are you?" she finally asked. "I am called Two Hawks," he answered. "Medicine man of the northern Salagi, Cherokee in your tongue, keeper of the ancient ways, seeker of balance between worlds." He paused, then added with unexpected intensity, "Protector of the blood covenant made when stars fell and your ancestors first crossed the Great Water." Another rifle shot sounded, closer this time, followed by a third. Not hunting shots. They came too close together, too deliberately spaced. Someone was signaling across the canyon. Two Hawks' expression hardened. They sweep the canyons looking for something, or someone. His gaze fixed on Charlotte with new urgency. "You saw their faces. You are witness to their crimes." The realization struck Charlotte with terrible clarity. The raiders weren't simply passing through the territory again. They were hunting her. Perhaps they had counted bodies at the massacre site and found one missing. Perhaps they had discovered signs of her escape. Whatever the reason, they were methodically searching the canyon system, and the approaching storm would soon force her from the relative safety of her cave as food. And firewood ran out. Two Hawks seemed to read the shifting calculations on her face. "Choose quickly, young one," he said. "Storm comes, hunters come. I offer protection, but cannot wait long." Charlotte's world narrowed to this impossible choice. Trust this stranger, from a people she had been taught to fear, or face both the killers and the storm alone. The knife in her hand suddenly seemed pitifully inadequate against either threat. "How do I know you're not with them?" she demanded, a final desperate question. Two Hawks' expression shifted subtly, revealing a depth of sadness and ancient wisdom. "The men who killed your people have broken the sacred balance. They take without giving, destroy without creating." Charlotte backed away from the tracks, abandoning her final trap unchecked. She moved with painful caution, taking a circuitous route back to her cave, doubling back multiple times to ensure she wasn't followed. She paused frequently to listen, straining her ears for any sound that didn't belong to the natural rhythm of the canyon. By the time she reached her sanctuary, the winter sun had passed its zenith. She slipped inside, securing the door more thoroughly than usual, then retreated to the deepest shadows of the cave. Her hands trembled as she skinned the rabbit, her mind racing with newfound fear. 3 months of vigilance, and now this. It couldn't be coincidence. Someone was deliberately exploring these canyons. But why? The area held no particular resources that would draw settlers, and the local tribes typically avoided these narrow passages during winter when flash floods from sudden snowmelt posed a constant threat. That night, Charlotte didn't light her fire despite the biting cold. She wrapped herself in every layer of clothing and fur she possessed and huddled in darkness, listening to the wind moan through the canyon outside. Sleep evaded her entirely, her mind conjuring scenarios each more terrifying than the last. The next morning brought heavy clouds and the promise of more snow. Charlotte ventured out only far enough to confirm that no fresh tracks surrounded her cave, then retreated inside to wait out the coming storm. The snowfall began mid-morning, a gentle curtain that gradually transformed into driving sheets of white. By evening, nearly a foot of fresh powder had accumulated, effectively erasing all signs of human passage from the canyon. For 3 days, the storm raged, delivering the heaviest snowfall Charlotte had witnessed since seeking refuge in the canyon. When the skies finally cleared, the landscape had been transformed into an alien terrain of deep drifts and buried landmarks. Moving through this new topography would be exhausting and dangerous, but it also granted a temporary reprieve from discovery. No one, regardless of their tracking skill, could follow her now buried trail. Nevertheless, Charlotte redoubled her precautions. She ventured from the cave only when absolutely necessary, abandoned her more distant snares, and gathered water from a small seep inside a rock crevice, rather than visiting the main stream that ran through the canyon floor. For 2 weeks, she detected nothing unusual. The moccasin prints remained buried beneath layers of snow and ice, and no new tracks appeared in the vicinity of her shelter. Gradually, Charlotte began to extend her movements again, driven by the increasing scarcity of food in her immediate surroundings. It was during one such foray, nearly 3 weeks after spotting the mysterious tracks, that disaster struck. Charlotte had ventured to a south-facing slope where early sunlight had exposed patches of ground, and the first tender shoots of early spring growth pushed through the soil. She was gathering these precious greens, her attention focused downward, when a sound stopped her heart, the unmistakable snap of a twig beneath a heavy foot. Charlotte froze, her fingers still wrapped around a handful of shoots. Slowly, without moving her head, she shifted her gaze upward, scanning the canyon in the direction of the sound. At first, she saw nothing but rock formations and lingering patches of snow. Then a shadow detached itself from the deeper shadows of a narrow side passage, a tall figure standing utterly motionless, watching her with the stillness of a mountain lion assessing its prey. The figure was clearly a man, broad-shouldered and imposing despite his advanced age, evident in the silver hair that hung in 2 long braids, adorned with feathers and small carved beads. He wore buckskins and a fur-lined cloak against the winter cold, with elaborate beadwork decorating the chest piece of his garment. His copper skin and distinctive clothing identified him immediately as one of the indigenous people who had inhabited these canyons long before white settlers arrived. Their eyes met across 40 yards of canyon floor. Charlotte's instinct screamed at her to run, but experience had taught her the futility of flight. She wouldn't outpace a native hunter on his home terrain. Instead, she slowly rose to her full height, Mr. Holloway's hunting knife now gripped in her right hand, her eyes never leaving the watcher's face. For a long moment neither moved. They remained locked in mutual assessment, prey and predator, survivor and discoverer, woman and man. Yet something in the elder's posture suggested he was as surprised by the encounter as she was. "I bring no harm, daughter of the Eagle Star," the man called in accented but clear English, his deep voice carrying easily across the distance between them. "You are far from your rightful place in this world." Charlotte remained silent, her knife held before her in what she knew was a pathetic defense. The elder's words confused her. Daughter of the Eagle Star. Was that some tribal term for white women? Her eyes darted briefly to the surrounding canyon, calculating possible escape. Roots. There are worse dangers in these canyons than an old medicine man, he continued, making no move to approach her. I have followed your trail for many days. You hide well for one not born to the people. Leave me alone, Charlotte finally responded, her voice rough from disuse, barely above a whisper. I don't need help. A trace of something, perhaps amusement, perhaps respect, flickered across the elder's weathered features. Your snares are empty, your clothing thins. Winter lingers long in high country. He gestured toward the northern horizon. Storm approaches. 3 days of snow and wind. Alone, you may not survive it. As if summoned by his words, Charlotte noticed the dark bank of clouds building in the distance. Another storm system, perhaps even more severe than the last. Her food stores were critically low, her firewood nearly depleted. She had planned to spend the day gathering both. The elder seemed to read her thoughts. I make camp in the sacred. Cave beyond the three-peaked ridge. Food, fire, shelter. He paused, then added with surprising gentleness, no harm will come to you there. Why would you help me? Charlotte demanded, her voice stronger now, edged with the suspicion that had kept her alive for months. I have seen you in my medicine dreams, the elder replied simply. The woman who walks between worlds, carrying old blood in new lands, the one the ancestors have spoken of. The statement struck Charlotte with unexpected force. This strange talk of dreams and ancestors, was it merely the superstition Boston missionaries had described in their fundraising lectures? Or could this elderly native somehow sense the secrets she herself had been running from when she joined the wagon train? Before she could respond, a distant sound reached them both, the faint but distinctive crack of a rifle shot echoing across the canyon from the eastern approaches. The elder's head turned sharply toward the noise, his body tensing visibly. Bad men hunt these canyons, he said, his voice lower, more urgent. Men who take what is not theirs, who kill without honor or need. He looked back at Charlotte, his dark eyes intense. Same men who attacked your wagon people. A cold that had nothing to do with the winter air seeped into Charlotte's bones. The raiders. They had returned to the territory. How do you know about that? She asked, her knife hand trembling slightly. Found burnt wagons when snow first fell. Found bodies. His expression revealed a controlled anger. Found sign of men who kill for pleasure and profit, not need. Charlotte's mind raced. If the elder had found the massacre site, he knew far more about her than she had realized. Yet he had made no attempt to capture or harm her during the weeks he'd apparently been tracking her movements. Who are you? She finally asked. I am called Two Hawks, he answered. Medicine man of the northern Tsalagi, Cherokee in your tongue, keeper of the ancient ways, seeker of balance between worlds. He paused, then added with unexpected intensity, protector of the blood covenant made when stars fell and your ancestors first crossed the great water. Another rifle shot sounded, closer this time, followed by a third. Not hunting shots, they came too close together, too deliberately spaced. Someone was signaling across the canyon. Two Hawks' expression hardened. They sweep the canyons looking for something. Or someone, his gaze fixed on Charlotte with new urgency. You saw their faces. You are witness to their crimes. The realization struck Charlotte with terrible clarity. The raiders weren't simply passing through the territory again. They were hunting her. Perhaps they had counted bodies at the massacre site and found one missing. Perhaps they had discovered signs of her escape. Whatever the reason, they were methodically searching the canyon system, and the approaching storm would soon force her from the relative safety of her cave as food. And firewood ran out. Two Hawks seemed to read the shifting calculations on her face. Choose quickly, young one, he said. Storm comes, hunters come. I offer protection, but cannot wait long. Charlotte's world narrowed to this impossible choice. Trust this stranger. From a people she had been taught to fear, or face both the killers and the storm alone. The knife in her hand suddenly seemed pitifully inadequate against either threat. "How do I know you're not with them?" she demanded, a final desperate question. Two Hawk's expression shifted subtly, revealing a depth of sadness and ancient wisdom. "The men who killed your people have broken the sacred balance. They take without giving, destroy without creating. When I was a young man learning medicine ways, my teacher showed me sacred bundle passed through generations of healers," he began, his deep voice taking on the cadence of formal storytelling. Inside were strange objects: metal disc with royal seal, parchment with writing from across great water, small painting of woman wearing crown. He stirred the fire thoughtfully. "My teacher told story passed down from time when Cherokee still lived in eastern mountains. During bloody time, when great nation across water cut off king's head and hunted nobles through streets, some royal children escaped. One ship carrying royal children landed on our shores, seeking sanctuary." Charlotte's historical education filled in the context: the French Revolution, the Terror, the systematic execution of aristocracy. But what connection could that possibly have to her family? "Cherokee chief made sacred covenant with children's protectors," Two Hawks continued. "In exchange for sanctuary and silence about their presence, royal blood promised eternal alliance between their descendants and Cherokee nation. The children were given to trusted white families to raise as their own, their true identities hidden, their royal inheritance protected until safe time for return." He reached for his medicine pouch, extracting a small object wrapped in soft buckskin. "As proof of covenant, each child left mark that would identify their bloodline through generations." When he unwrapped the buckskin, Charlotte gasped audibly. Inside lay a small metal medallion bearing a royal crest she instantly recognized from her mother's secreted keepsakes. The fleur-de-lis surrounded by stars. "This is impossible," she whispered. "That's the same crest my mother kept hidden in her jewelry case. She told me it was a family heirloom, but never explained its origin." "Not heirloom," Two Hawks corrected gently. "Birthright. Sign of Bourbon bloodline, cousins to king, guillotined by revolutionaries. Your ancestor was royal child, spirited away to America. The birthmark behind your ear, Eagle Star, marks all descendants of that bloodline. Now appears only in one child each generation." Charlotte's mind reeled with implications. The strange protectiveness of her mother regarding family history, her father's insistence on perfect French despite their thoroughly American existence, the unexplained visitors who occasionally appeared at their Boston home, speaking in hushed tones with her parents before disappearing again. Even if this were true, she argued, why would it matter now? Those events happened nearly a century ago. France has been through multiple governments since then. Two Hawks regarded her with patient intensity. Blood claims never die among those who value lineage. Royal families of Europe still search for lost lines, still maintain old alliances and enmities. His expression darkened. And those who hunted royals then have descendants who hunt them still. The assertion seemed fantastical, like something from the lurid novels Charlotte had secretly read, despite her mother's disapproval. Yet Two Hawks' knowledge of the medallion and birthmark couldn't be coincidental. "The men who attacked your wagon train," Two Hawks said, changing direction abruptly. "Describe their leader." Charlotte closed her eyes, summoning the terrible memory. "Tall man, black bandana, but I saw his face briefly when he drank from his canteen, heavy beard, scar across his right cheek. The others called him Bishop." Two Hawks nodded grimly. "Same man, European accent when speaks without thinking, hunts throughout territories, killing settlers, but some killings not random." He leaned toward her. Some deaths very specific. Families with certain histories, certain connections, families with old European ties. You're suggesting the wagon train massacre wasn't just banditry? Charlotte asked incredulously. That they specifically targeted someone. Targeted you, Two Hawks confirmed, or someone they believed traveled with your wagon party, someone with royal blood. A chill ran through Charlotte that had nothing to do with the winter air. Could her impulsive flight from Boston following the scandal at her debut ball have inadvertently led these killers to innocent families? Had her presence doomed the entire wagon train? No, Two Hawks said, reading her expression. Guilt not yours to carry. These men hunt many trails. Your presence did not cause their evil. He stoked the fire. But now they know someone survived. They search for witness to their crime. Finding you would serve both purposes, silencing witness and eliminating bloodline they have hunted for generations. Skewered bighorn meat crackled over the flames as Two Hawks continued his explanation. Bishop serves old society born in French Revolution, les enfants de la nouvelle aube, the children of the new dawn. They believe all royal bloodlines must be extinguished for true equality to flourish. For generations they have hunted scattered descendants across continents. This is insanity, Charlotte whispered. I'm not royalty. I'm the daughter of a Boston merchant who scandalized society by refusing a suitable marriage. I joined the wagon train to escape gossip, not assassins. Two Hawks handed her a portion of roasted meat. Eat now, strength first, then understanding. They shared their meal in silence, Charlotte's mind spinning with revelations that seemed too fantastic to believe, yet explained too many family mysteries to dismiss. As the fire burned down to coals, Two Hawks produced a small copper kettle, preparing a tea from his stored herbs. Drink, he instructed, passing her a wooden cup of steaming liquid, brings clarity to troubled thoughts. The tea was bitter, but not unpleasant, with undertones of sage and sweetness. As Charlotte sipped, warmth spread through her limbs, easing the day's accumulated aches. Two Hawks watched her with quiet attention, his ageless eyes reflecting the firelight. Tomorrow I show you proof, he said finally. Tonight rest in safety. No raiders penetrate this canyon without my knowledge. He arranged furs and blankets for her near the fire, then moved to the cave entrance, where he sat in meditative stillness, maintaining watch. Despite her mental turmoil, exhaustion quickly overcame Charlotte. The tea's effects, combined with the first true security she had known in months, pulled her toward deep sleep. Just before consciousness fled, a strange certainty formed in her mind that the path she had been traveling since fleeing Boston was not random flight, but predestined return. That the canyon had called to her not by chance, but by blood memory. The Two Hawks had found her not through ordinary tracking, but through spiritual connection maintained across generations. Her last coherent thought was a memory of her mother's voice on the night before Charlotte's disastrous debut ball. Remember always that you carry the hopes and dignity of generations in your every action. Some burdens of birth cannot be abandoned, only carried with grace. Dawn arrived with the promised storm, transforming the canyon landscape into swirling chaos of wind-driven snow. Charlotte woke to find Two Hawks already active, tending the fire and preparing a breakfast of dried berries, soaked in hot water and strips of smoked meat. Storm good for us, bad for them, Two Hawks observed, handing Charlotte a wooden bowl of the simple fare. Covers our tracks, forces raiders to seek shelter. The preparation began immediately after their spare meal. Despite the weather, Two Hawks insisted they use the enforced confinement for what he called awakening the blood memory. Your body remembers what your mind has forgotten, he explained, guiding her to a small side chamber illuminated by a single fat-burning stone lamp. Royal blood carries more than just birthright, carries knowledge, carries responsibility. On the chamber wall hung a circular arrangement of feathers, stones, and carved symbols surrounding a polished obsidian mirror. Two hawks positioned Charlotte before this medicine wheel, instructing her to gaze into the black glass while he chanted in his native tongue. Charlotte felt ridiculous at first, expecting nothing from this primitive ritual. But as two hawks, chanting continued, accompanied by the rhythmic shaking of a turtle shell rattle, a strange sensation began to build, not in her mind, but in her body. A humming awareness that started at the birthmark behind her ear and spread through her limbs like liquid fire. Images formed in the obsidian's reflective surface, not from external sources, but from within Charlotte herself. A ship tossing on stormy seas, children huddled in cramped quarters, a formal ceremony conducted by firelight, Cherokee elders and European aristocrats exchanging solemn vows. The visions shifted, accelerated, a succession of faces, some vaguely familiar from family portraits, others completely unknown. Each bore the same star-shaped birthmark, though in different locations, behind ears, on wrists, at the hairline. When the visions finally subsided, Charlotte found herself trembling, her body covered in cold sweat, despite the chamber's warmth. Two hawks supported her to a sitting position, offering water from a clay cup. "What happened?" she gasped when speech returned. "Blood remembers," he replied simply. "Your ancestors' stories sleep in your bones until awakened. Now they begin to stir." "That's impossible," Charlotte protested, though with less conviction than before. "Memories aren't hereditary." Two hawks smiled faintly. "Western medicine knows body, not spirit. Some knowledge passes through blood, through bone, through birthmarks that reappear generation after generation." He helped her return to the main chamber, where the fire had been built up against the intensifying storm. Outside, wind howled through the canyon like restless spirits, while inside the ancient cave, Charlotte confronted implications that shattered her understanding of herself. "If what you say is true," she said slowly, "if I do carry this royal bloodline, what does it matter now? Those monarchies are gone or transformed. America has no kings." Two hawks settled beside the fire, adding aromatic cedar that filled the cave with sacred scent. Blood oath remains. Cherokee protected royal children, kept secret of their existence, helped them establish new identities. In return, royal descendants promised alliance when Cherokee need arose. He stared into the flames, his weathered face reflecting deep concern. "That time has come. Cherokee people face removal from ancestral lands. Government signs treaties, then breaks them when gold or silver found. My people sent me to find descendants of blood oath, to call in ancient promise." Charlotte stared at him in disbelief. "You expect me to help your tribe based on an agreement made by strangers a century ago?" "Not strangers," Two Hawks corrected, "your direct ancestors, and help not just for Cherokee, but for you also. Bishop and his hunters will never stop searching. Only by embracing your true identity, claiming ancient allies, can you hope to survive." The day continued with Two Hawks producing further evidence of Charlotte's heritage, detailed genealogies preserved through generations of medicine keepers, symbolic objects passed down from the original covenant, even a faded letter written in aristocratic French that outlined the terms of protection and alliance. As afternoon faded toward evening, with the storm still raging outside, Two Hawks unveiled his most compelling proof. From a carefully wrapped bundle of ceremonial objects, he extracted a miniature portrait painted on ivory. A young woman in late 18th century aristocratic dress, bearing an uncanny resemblance to Charlotte herself. "Your great-grandmother," he explained. "Marie-Claire de Bourbon-Condé, second cousin to Louis XVI, smuggled from France 1 month before terror began." Charlotte's fingers trembled as she held the tiny portrait. The resemblance was undeniable. The same high cheekbones, the distinctive arch of eyebrows, even the determined set of the mouth that Charlotte's mother had always tried to correct as unbecomingly stubborn. She married Boston merchant who protected her, Two Hawks continued, took his name, Blackwood, but maintained secret contact with Cherokee protectors through generations. Your grandfather renewed blood oath during Treaty Council. Your father visited Cherokee elders before your birth. My father, Charlotte whispered. He knew about this? Two Hawks nodded solemnly. All firstborn children with birthmark are told when they come of age. You would have learned after your society. Introduction. The debut ball, Charlotte had fled. Had her parents intended to reveal her heritage afterward? Had her impulsive departure after refusing an arranged marriage proposal deprived her of understanding her true identity? The raiders, she said, returning to immediate concerns. You believe they specifically target descendants like me? How would they even know about us? Secret societies have long memories, Two Hawks replied, and spies in many places. European visitor to Boston Society event notices, birthmark hidden behind ear, whispered rumor of family with French royal connections. Investigation reveals pattern of contact with Cherokee representatives. He shrugged. For dedicated hunters, such clues enough to follow. The storm continued through the night and into the following day, giving Charlotte time to absorb these revelations. Two Hawks used the confinement to begin her education, not just in her royal heritage, but in practical skills needed for their journey ahead. When storm passes, we must travel to Cherokee Council grounds, he explained, demonstrating how to create proper moccasins from the bighorn hide. Elders gather there to decide tribes' response to new removal threats. Your presence, your testimony will honor ancient covenant and strengthen Cherokee position against government pressure. What could I possibly offer tribal elders? Charlotte asked, struggling to master the precise stitching technique. I have no political influence. Blood speaks louder than position, Two Hawks answered. European governments still maintain secret contact with scattered royal bloodlines. Cherokee know this. Evidence of covenant with European royalty gives weight to tribal claims in international courts. The third day brought clearing skies and diminishing winds. As they prepared for departure, Two Hawks assessed their situation with characteristic pragmatism. Raiders will resume search once paths clear, must travel carefully, leaving no sign. He studied the canyon's upper reaches. Will follow high. Paths first, then sacred waterways. Journey to council grounds takes 7 days, if no trouble finds us. Charlotte had spent the storm days preparing for this journey, repairing clothing, creating proper moccasins under Two Hawks' guidance, learning rudimentary Cherokee phrases that might prove useful. Now, standing at the cave entrance surveying the snow-transformed landscape, she felt both trepidation and strange exhilaration. What if we encounter Bishop and his men? She asked, adjusting the bighorn hide cloak Two Hawks had crafted for her. The medicine man's expression hardened. Then they learn why Cherokee warriors were feared even by those with guns. From beneath his robes, he produced a revolver, a Smith & Wesson Model 3, incongruously modern against his traditional appearance. Medicine ways are first path. When those fail, modern ways suffice. As they prepared to depart the sacred cave, Two Hawks performed a blessing ceremony, burning sage and cedar while chanting prayers for protection. Charlotte, raised in austere Protestant tradition, found herself drawn to these more visceral spiritual practices, tangible connections to forces beyond ordinary understanding. Remember, Two Hawks said, as they finally set out into the snow-covered Canyon. You walk between worlds now, Charlotte Blackwood, not fully of white society anymore, not of Cherokee people. Something new, born from ancient covenant. This makes you bridge between worlds. Dangerous position, but powerful one. Charlotte adjusted the medicine pouch Two Hawks had gifted her, containing the royal medallion and a small portion of sacred herbs, now hanging around her neck alongside Mr. Holloway's hunting knife. "I don't feel powerful," she admitted. "I feel hunted." Two Hawks nodded solemnly. Hunted animals die, cowering in corners. Hunted humans choose different paths. His weathered face revealed a lifetime of wisdom, earned through hardship. They become hunters themselves. The journey from the sacred cave tested Charlotte's fortitude beyond anything she had experienced during her months of solitary survival. Two Hawks set a punishing pace through the high canyon passages, following routes invisible to untrained eyes, ancient pathways carved into stone by centuries of native passage, unmarked by any sign recognizable to white settlers. Each day began before dawn and continued until darkness made travel impossible. Charlotte's newly crafted moccasins, though infinitely superior to her deteriorating boots, raised blisters that burst and reformed until calluses gradually hardened. Her once pampered feet, the traditional deerskin clothing Two Hawks had prepared, offered better protection against the winter elements than her tattered Boston garments, but the cold still penetrated, settling into her bones during the long hours of travel. Yet Charlotte never complained. With each challenging mile, her body grew stronger, more adapted to this unforgiving landscape. The aristocratic softness that had defined her Boston existence burned away like morning mist under the desert sun, revealing something finer and more resilient beneath. Your royal ancestors survived revolution and flight across oceans. Two Hawks observed on their third evening, as they made camp in a sheltered alcove beneath a massive sandstone arch. Survival flows in your blood. Your body remembers what your mind forgot. Charlotte rubbed salve into her aching muscles, reflecting on how completely her perception had transformed in mere days. In Boston, ancestry meant attendance at the right schools and invitations to proper social functions. I never imagined it could mean this, ancient covenants and secret bloodlines. Two Hawks arranged a small, nearly smokeless fire of desert sage and juniper. White society values what can be counted: money, land, titles written on paper. Cherokee understand different wealth, knowledge passed through generations, memories carried in blood, connections between all living things. He prepared their evening meal, journey bread made from ground corn and dried berries, supplemented by small game trapped along their route. Each animal taken was honored with prayer, every part utilized with reverence that transformed necessity into sacred practice. Tomorrow we reach boundary between canyonlands and pine forests, Two Hawks explained as they ate. More dangerous territory. Hunters, trappers, sometimes soldiers patrol forest edges, must travel only in darkness, hide during daylight. Charlotte nodded, accepting this new challenge without protest. The woman who had once required assistance to descend from carriages now moved through wilderness with growing confidence, absorbing Two Hawks' teachings with the determination of one whose survival depended on swift mastery. That night, as they sat beside the dying embers of their small fire, Two Hawks removed a medicine bundle from his pack, a deerskin wrap containing objects of ceremonial significance. "Time for second teaching," he announced. "First teaching, awakened blood memory. Second teaching prepares spirit for challenges ahead." From the bundle, he withdrew a carved wooden flute, a turtle shell rattle, and a small clay pot containing a paste of crushed herbs. With ritualistic precision, he applied a small amount of the paste to Charlotte's forehead, over her heart, and to her palms. "Medicine of clear seeing," he explained, "opens pathways between waking mind and spirit knowledge." The ceremony that Followed combined rhythmic sounds, ancient chants, and guidance into meditative states unlike anything in Charlotte's experience. As Two Hawks played the wooden flute, its haunting notes echoing against the sandstone walls, Charlotte felt her consciousness expanding beyond ordinary perception. Visions formed with startling clarity. European castles transformed into revolutionary bloodbaths, children smuggled through secret passages, ocean voyages under assumed identities, Cherokee elders conducting smoke ceremonies to obscure the royal children's passage into new American lives. But beyond these ancestral memories came something more immediate and disturbing. Impressions of current danger moving through the landscape. Men with scarred faces and cold eyes, methodically searching canyons and forests, a network of informants in frontier towns and trading posts, a ruthless determination that had persisted through generations. When the ceremony concluded, Charlotte emerged from the visionary state with newfound clarity. "They're everywhere," she whispered, still seeing the web of hunters in her mind's eye. Not just Bishop and his immediate men, but others, in towns, in government offices, in banks and businesses. "It's an entire organization dedicated to finding people like me." Two Hawks nodded grimly. "Les enfants de la nouvelle aube." Larger than most understand. Revolutionary hatred transformed into secret society that spans generations. Some join for ideology, others for power or wealth gained from eliminating old bloodlines and claiming abandoned properties. The revelation crystallized Charlotte's understanding of her predicament. This wasn't merely about escaping a band of frontier murderers, but confronting a sophisticated network with resources and influence, extending to the highest levels of society. "How can we possibly overcome such powerful enemies?" she asked. Two Hawks' weathered face revealed the quiet confidence of one who had faced seemingly insurmountable odds throughout his long life. "Even largest river begins as small spring," he replied. "Even strongest enemy has weakness. Your ancestors survived because they understood patience, discretion, and the power of unexpected alliances." He added a small branch to their fire. "Cherokee Council has gathered evidence against this society for generations. Names, locations, connections. Your testimony completes pattern, provides final proof needed for action." "Action by whom?" Charlotte questioned. "You said yourself the government breaks treaties with your people constantly. Why would they listen now?" "Not all government officials corrupt," Two Hawks answered. "Some men of honor remain, even in Washington. Cherokee have cultivated allies in strategic positions, judges, military leaders, newspaper editors. With complete evidence, these allies can move against les enfants openly." As sleep finally claimed her that night, Charlotte's dreams continued the visionary journey, but now showing not just past and present, but glimpses of possible futures. Paths diverged and reconnected, some leading to triumph, others to tragedy. The responsibility of choice weighed heavily upon her awakening. Dawn found them already moving through the transitional landscape where desert canyons gradually yielded to pine forests at higher elevations. As Two Hawks had warned, they now traveled only in the obscurity of early morning mist and evening shadow, concealing themselves during daylight hours when other travelers might pass. On the afternoon of their fifth day, while hidden in a dense thicket overlooking a crude frontier road, Charlotte witnessed firsthand the reach of their pursuers. A group of 6 riders approached from the direction of the nearest settlement. Ordinary-looking men who might have been hunters or traders to casual observation. But the precision of their movement, the methodical way they studied the terrain, revealed their true purpose. "Bishop's men," Two Hawks whispered unnecessarily, "wearing different faces, but same wolves inside." Charlotte watched with cold clarity as the men stopped directly below their hiding place. The leader, a sharp-featured man with a distinctive European accent, consulted a crude map while issuing instructions. "The Cherokee Council ground lies 20 miles northwest," he informed his companions. "Our informant confirms the medicine man travels toward the gathering with a woman companion. If she is the wagon train survivor, she may also be the Bourbon descendant our French associates have tracked to this territory." Another rider spat contemptuously. "Seems like a lot of effort for one woman. Why not just burn the entire Cherokee Council and be done with it?" The leader's expression hardened. "Because such obvious action would attract federal investigation. Our society thrives in shadow, eliminating bloodlines surgically when necessary, maintaining invisibility always." He refolded the map. "Besides, the council ground is protected by federal observers for the treaty negotiations. We require subtlety." The men continued their journey, passing directly beneath Charlotte and Two Hawks without detecting their presence. Only when they had disappeared around a bend in the road did Charlotte release her breath. "They know exactly where we're going," she whispered. Two Hawks nodded grimly. "Expected this. Les enfants always maintain spies near tribal gatherings." He studied the road thoughtfully. "Must change approach now. Too dangerous to continue. Direct path." That evening, Two Hawks led Charlotte on a significant detour, moving east away from their destination before circling north through more difficult terrain, rarely traversed even by native hunters. The path required climbing near vertical, rock faces, crossing ice-cold streams, and navigating dense underbrush that tore at clothing and skin. "They expect us to take obvious route," Two Hawks explained, "so we become like water finding unseen passage through stone." The detour added 2 difficult days to their journey, pushing both to the limits of endurance. Charlotte's hands bled. From climbing rough stone, her legs trembled with exhaustion each evening. Yet her spirit remained unbroken. Each obstacle conquered reinforced her growing confidence, transforming the refined Boston debutante into something stronger and more resolute. On the evening of the 8th day, as they made camp in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, Two Hawks announced they would reach the council ground by noon tomorrow, if they survived the night. "We have entered sacred boundary lands," he explained, creating a protective circle of crushed herbs around their campsite. "Ancient spirits dwell here, testing those who seek Cherokee counsel. Many turn back, overcome by visions or fears." Charlotte had grown accustomed to Two Hawks' spiritual perspectives, no longer dismissing them as primitive superstition. Her own experiences over recent days, the awakened blood memories, the expanding awareness of connections between past and present, had opened her to possibilities beyond rational explanation. "What kind of tests?" she asked, helping to arrange the protective herbs. "Different for each person," Two Hawks replied. "Spirits reveal what most threatens heart's courage. For warrior might be memory of battle lost. For mother, children. Endangered. For you." He studied her thoughtfully, perhaps confrontation with identity abandoned. The medicine man prepared a small ceremonial fire, adding specific plants that released aromatic smoke. "Sleep now," he instructed. "Whatever comes in dreams tonight, remember, it is test only. Your spirit already knows truth beyond appearances." Charlotte settled onto her bedroll, watching stars appear between the towering pines as darkness claimed the forest. Despite physical exhaustion, sleep came reluctantly, her mind churning with anticipation of tomorrow's arrival at the council, grounds, and whatever mystical challenges the night might bring. When dreams finally claimed her, they came with astonishing vividness. She found herself back in Boston, dressed in the elaborate gown of her debut ball, surrounded by the glittering society she had fled. Her mother approached, face tight with disappointment. "You've ruined everything," the familiar voice scolded. "The alliance with the Pembroke family would have secured our position permanently. Instead, you've thrown away generations of careful planning on childish rebellion." The ballroom transformed, guests suddenly revealing themselves as agents of les enfants, their elegant attire concealing weapons and malicious intent. Only the arranged marriage could have protected her from discovery. The dream shifted again. Charlotte stood before a European palace, dressed in royal regalia, courtiers bowing as she passed. A crown-bearer approached, offering the symbol of restored monarchy, if only she would renounce her American identity and Cherokee alliance. "Your true destiny," a silken voice promised. "Reclaim your ancestral throne. Leave behind these primitive associations." The temptation pulled at something deep within, a longing for recognition, for the power to reshape a world that had forced her ancestors into hiding. The crown glittered with hypnotic allure. A final transformation brought her to a crossroads in a misty forest. 3 paths stretched before her, one returning to Boston society, one leading to European restoration, one continuing toward the Cherokee Council. At each path stood figures representing these different futures, beckoning with competing promises. "Choose!" they demanded in unison. "You cannot walk all paths. You cannot be all things." Charlotte stood frozen in indecision, each option seemingly requiring the sacrifice of essential parts of herself. The pressure built until she felt her identity fracturing under impossible choices. Then cutting through the dream's confusion came Two Hawks' voice, not commanding but questioning. "Who says you must choose only one path? Who declares these ways cannot converge?" The simple questions shattered the dream's internal logic. The crossroads blurred, then reformed into a single path that somehow incorporated elements from all 3 directions, not as compromise, but as integration. Charlotte realized with sudden clarity that her unique value lay precisely in her ability to bridge these seemingly separate worlds. She woke with first light, the dream's resolution still vivid. Two Hawks already sat by a small morning fire, his expression revealing he understood what she had experienced without need for explanation. "The test?" she asked simply. "You faced it well," he confirmed. "Most see only separation between worlds. Few recognize the pattern that connects all things." As they shared a simple breakfast and prepared for the final leg of their journey, Charlotte felt a profound shift in her understanding. The fragmented pieces of her identity, Boston merchant's daughter, descendant of European royalty, ally to Cherokee nation, no longer competed for primacy but formed a coherent whole greater than its parts. They traveled through morning mist, following game trails that gradually widened into more established paths. The forest grew older, the trees more massive, with distinctive markings carved into certain trunks, tribal symbols indicating proximity to sacred ground. Near midday, they crested a small rise and beheld the Cherokee Council ground spread across a protected valley below. Unlike the crude frontier settlements Charlotte had expected, the site impressed her with its ordered sophistication. Dozens of structures arranged in circular patterns surrounded a central council house built of massive timbers. Gardens, though dormant in winter, showed evidence of careful cultivation. Smoke rose from cooking fires while children played under watchful eyes of elders. "Many believe Cherokee live like wild animals," Two Hawks observed, noting her surprise. "Easier to steal land from savages than from civilized people with permanent homes and cultivated fields." They descended toward the settlement, passing sentries posted discreetly among the trees. These guards exchanged complex hand signals with Two Hawks, confirming his identity and rite of passage. News of their arrival spread quickly through the community. As they approached the central council area, a delegation emerged to greet them. 5 men and 2 women, all of advanced age, dressed in a blend of traditional Cherokee garments and adapted European clothing. Their bearing conveyed unmistakable dignity and authority. Two Hawks greeted the elders with formal Cherokee phrases, gestures of deep respect accompanying his words. When he introduced Charlotte, he used a name she hadn't heard before, Tsigeu Wahuhi, meaning Star Woman in The Cherokee language. The one foretold, Two Hawks explained in English for Charlotte's benefit, daughter of Eagle Star, carrier of royal blood, fulfillment of ancient covenant. The eldest of the council, a white-haired man with penetrating eyes, studied Charlotte. With measured assessment. "The birthmark?" he asked in perfect, if-accented English. Charlotte hesitated only briefly before turning her head and lifting her hair to reveal the star-shaped mark behind her ear. The council members murmured among themselves, several nodding in confirmation. "The sign passes through generations without fail," the elder observed. "Just as our ancestors foresaw." He made a ceremonial gesture of welcome. "I am Principal Chief Sequoia. Our council has awaited your coming, though we did not know when or through whom the covenant would be honored." Charlotte found herself escorted to the council house, a large, circular structure with a central fire pit and raised seating platforms arranged in hierarchical patterns. The space already contained 24 tribal representatives, along with several white men in formal attire, whom Charlotte recognized as government officials. The atmosphere held palpable tension. Documents lay spread on portable writing desks, quill pens and ink pots suggesting interrupted negotiations. The white officials regarded Charlotte's arrival with poorly concealed suspicion, while tribal representatives showed guarded optimism. "What is this interruption?" demanded the most elaborately dressed official, clearly the Federal Commission's leader. "We were making progress on the resettlement terms." Chief Sequoia's response carried quiet authority. "This woman's arrival changes the nature of our discussions, Commissioner. She represents interests beyond territorial jurisdiction." "Preposterous," the commissioner blustered. "She appears to be an ordinary settler woman, probably captive or deranged, certainly not a factor in official treaty negotiations." Two Hawks stepped forward, addressing the officials with unexpected formality. "This woman carries bloodline, protected by international agreements predating United States itself. Her testimony regarding frontier massacres and the society responsible bears directly on these negotiations." Before the commissioner could object further, another white man rose from among the government representatives, a distinguished figure in military uniform bearing the insignia of a colonel. "I believe we should hear what the lady has to say," he stated firmly. "My instructions from Washington include investigating reported organized criminal activities in the territory, particularly those affecting relations between settlers and native tribes." Charlotte recognized the strategic opening. Two Hawks had mentioned allies in positions of influence. This military observer clearly represented such a connection. She stepped forward, consciously drawing on her Boston social training while embodying the newborn confidence of her wilderness journey. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and measured, "my name is Charlotte Blackwood. 3 months ago, I survived the massacre of the Prescott-bound wagon train near Granite Mountain. The perpetrators were not hostile natives, as reported in territorial newspapers, but organized criminals operating under a leader called Bishop." She proceeded to recount the attack in precise detail, her testimony gaining power from its clinical accuracy. She described the raiders' method, their deliberate disguising of the crime scene to suggest native involvement, and their subsequent pursuit of survivors. When she finished this account, the colonial officer nodded thoughtfully. "Your description matches reports from other territories. Similar techniques, similar efforts to incite conflict between settlers and tribes." "There is more," Charlotte continued. "These men are not merely frontier bandits, but representatives of a society with European origins, les enfants de la nouvelle aube, dedicated to eliminating descendants of royal bloodlines who escaped the French Revolution." This assertion created immediate stir among the officials. The commissioner scoffed openly, but the colonel's expression revealed greater receptivity. That is quite a claim, Miss Blackwood. What evidence supports this extraordinary accusation? Two Hawks placed his medicine bundle on the council table, carefully unwrapping items collected through generations. Documents in aristocratic French handwriting, the royal medallion bearing the Bourbon crest, miniature portraits showing Charlotte's unmistakable resemblance to European nobility. Most compelling was the emergence of 3 Cherokee elders who produced correspondence spanning decades, communications between tribal leaders and representatives of exiled European royal families, confirming the ancient covenant and ongoing alliance. The Cherokee nation has protected these royal descendants for nearly a century, Chief Sequoia explained. In return, these families have maintained our cause in European courts and diplomatic circles, creating international pressure against tribal displacement. The colonel examined the evidence with professional thoroughness, his initial skepticism gradually transforming into strategic calculation. If verified, he acknowledged, this information would elevate tribal land claims from domestic policy to international diplomatic incident. European governments still sensitive to restoration movements might take considerable interest in how America treats allies of their former royal families. The commissioner sputtered indignantly. This is manipulation of the highest order. These savages have concocted an elaborate fantasy to obstruct progress and maintain unreasonable land claims. Actually, interjected another government representative who had remained silent until now, I can confirm portions of this account. He introduced himself as a State Department observer. Our diplomatic corps has received inquiries from European governments regarding treatment of certain American families with historical connections to pre-revolutionary aristocracy. We dismiss these as routine diplomatic courtesy, but perhaps we misunderstood their significance. As the implications unfolded across the council house, Charlotte observed the shifting power dynamics with newfound political awareness. The commissioner's dismissive arrogance gradually yielded to the colonel's more measured approach and the State Department representative's diplomatic concerns. Two Hawks had brought her not merely as witness to atrocity, but as living embodiment of international covenant, her very existence transforming a routine land negotiation into complex diplomatic calculation. There remains immediate danger, Two Hawks reminded the gathering. Bishop and his men approached the council ground, seeking both the witness to their crimes and the bloodline they have hunted for generations. The colonel rose decisively. I have 30 soldiers stationed 1 mile from here. With your permission, Chief Sequoia, I'll deploy them in protective formation around the council ground. He turned to Charlotte. I'd like to hear more details about these raiders. Numbers, weapons, likely approach routes. As the council transformed into strategic planning session, Charlotte found herself in unprecedented position, her knowledge valued equally by tribal leaders and government officials, her unique perspective bridging disparate worldviews. The Kas integration she had glimpsed in her spiritual test manifested in practical reality. That evening, as preparations proceeded for both diplomatic negotiations and potential confrontation with Bishop's forces, Charlotte stood with Two Hawks at the edge of the council ground, watching sunset paint the ancient forest in shades of amber and gold. When you found me half frozen in that canyon, she reflected, did you know it would lead to this? The old medicine man contemplated the horizon thoughtfully. Future shows many paths, like streams joining river. Could see possibilities, not certainties. He glanced at her with quiet approval. But strong spirits find their true course, even through roughest waters. Charlotte touched the star-shaped birthmark that had defined her destiny without her knowledge. I spent my life feeling caught between worlds, too independent for Boston society, too refined for frontier life. Now I understand why. I was meant to stand at the convergence, not choose between separate paths. Two hawks nodded. Bridge builders always live in two worlds, belonging fully to neither, serving both. Difficult position, but necessary one. He produced a small carved wooden star, offering it with ceremonial dignity. Cherokee makes sacred star in your honor. Symbol of covenant renewed through your courage. As Charlotte accepted this symbolic recognition, watchfires ignited around the perimeter of the council ground, preparation for the confrontation they all knew approached with the coming dawn. The rifle-armed Cherokee guardsmen and uniformed federal soldiers now moved in coordinated defense, unexpected allies united by common purpose. Charlotte Blackwood, once sheltered Boston debutante, lone survivor of Wagon Massacre, newly recognized royal descendant and honored ally of Cherokee Nation, surveyed these preparations with clear-eyed determination. The journey ahead remained fraught with danger and uncertainty, but for the first time since fleeing Boston society, she stood fully embodied in her complex identity, no longer running from who she was, but standing firmly at the intersection of worlds that needed desperately to reconnect. Tomorrow brings battle, Two Hawks observed, reading her thoughts. Yes, Charlotte agreed, her hand moving to the hunting knife at her belt, a gesture that would have scandalized Boston society, but now came naturally. But also opportunity to heal ancient wounds between worlds that should never have been separated. The medicine man's weathered face revealed rare approval. Now you truly awaken to your purpose. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just witness, but catalyst. As darkness claimed the forest, Charlotte embraced this newfound clarity, understanding that her royal blood, frontier resilience, and newfound Cherokee alliance formed not fragmented identity, but powerful integration. The convergence of these seemingly disparate threads now offered hope not just for her own survival, but for justice long deferred across generations and continents. Dawn broke over the Cherokee Council ground with ethereal beauty, golden light filtering through ancient pines, morning mist rising from the forest floor like spirits ascending. This tranquility belied the tension that gripped the settlement as defenders took positions along its perimeter. Charlotte stood with Two Hawks and Colonel James Harrington, the federal officer who had emerged as their most valuable ally, atop a small rise that afforded strategic overview of the surrounding terrain. The combined force of 30 federal soldiers and 40 Cherokee warriors had established a defensive perimeter overnight, creating overlapping fields of fire that would challenge even the most determined attackers. Bishop's men typically number between 10 and 15, Charlotte explained, indicating likely approach routes on the crude map Colonel Harrington had sketched. But Two Hawks believes they've recruited additional forces from local settlements. The colonel nodded grimly. Frontier towns harbor many men with questionable pasts and flexible morality. For sufficient payment, they'll join any cause without asking uncomfortable questions. Two Hawks, who had spent the pre-dawn hours in ceremonial preparation, studied the forest with preternatural awareness. "They come soon," he stated with quiet certainty. 27 riders approach from Southwest Passage, more circle to Eastern Approach. Colonel Harrington raised an eyebrow at this specific intelligence, information his own scouts had not yet reported, but had learned not to dismiss the medicine man's insights. "If they've split their forces, we need to adjust our defensive positioning." As they refined their strategy, Charlotte observed the interaction between these representatives of seemingly opposed worlds, the career military officer and the tribal medicine keeper, with profound appreciation for how quickly mutual respect had developed between them. Necessity had bridged cultural divides that might otherwise have seemed insurmountable. "Miss Blackwood," Colonel Harrington addressed her formally, "I must insist you remain in the central council house during the confrontation. As both witness to previous crimes and living proof of the royal connection, your safety is paramount." Charlotte shook her head decisively. With respect, Colonel, I didn't survive 3 months alone in the wilderness to hide behind others when danger threatens. I know Bishop's methods better than anyone except Two Hawks. You need my eyes and knowledge on this ridge. Before the officer could object, Two Hawks intervened. Star Woman has earned warrior's place. Her vision already saved many lives by warning of eastern approach. He handed Charlotte a brass spyglass, an incongruously modern tool among his traditional equipment. Your Boston education taught you reading and writing. Now use those skills to record what happens here today. History must have true witness, not just Victor's account. This compromise satisfied the Colonel's concern for her safety while respecting her determination to participate. Charlotte accepted the spyglass and a small leather-bound journal with solemn understanding of the responsibility being placed upon her, not just to survive, but to ensure that whatever transpired would be accurately preserved for future judgment. The council house had been transformed overnight, from negotiation chamber to command center and potential infirmary. Cherokee healers prepared medicines while government clerks organized documents proving the tribal royal covenant. The commissioner who had dismissed Charlotte's testimony now watched these preparations with poorly concealed dismay, his political calculations visibly shifting as military and diplomatic realities transformed around him. Chief Sequoia approached Charlotte as she gathered her observation materials. Unlike Two Hawks, who bridged native and white worlds through his role as medicine keeper, the principal chief embodied pure Cherokee authority, his every movement conveying the dignity of ancient lineage and communal responsibility. Your coming fulfills prophecy spoken when my grandfather's grandfather made covenant with your ancestors, he told her, presenting a small deerskin pouch. This contains sacred tobacco, blessed by 7 generations of medicine keepers. When conflict begins, cast small pinch toward each direction, north, east, south, west. This invokes protection of ancient spirits who witness covenant. Charlotte accepted this ceremonial responsibility with appropriate gravity. Her Boston upbringing had taught her to dismiss such primitive superstitions, but her wilderness months and Two Hawks' teachings had opened her to deeper understanding of how spiritual practices encoded generational wisdom and psychological preparation. The eastern sky had barely cleared the horizon when the first warning came. 3 sharp whistles from a concealed Cherokee scout signaling approaching riders. Charlotte took her position on the observation ridge, spyglass trained, on the southwestern forest approach. Through the powerful lens, she identified Bishop immediately, his distinctive scarred face no longer hidden behind a bandana as he led 20 mounted men toward the council ground. Their approach showed military precision that confirmed Charlotte's suspicion that many were veterans of frontier conflicts, likely former soldiers whose moral compromises had forced them from official service. On the eastern approach, a smaller force of perhaps 15 riders maintained position just within forest cover, clearly waiting for signal to create coordinated attack. Charlotte recorded these observations in precise detail, noting weaponry, formations, and identifying features of key participants. Colonel Harrington deployed his forces with strategic efficiency, placing sharpshooters in elevated positions while maintaining mobile reserves that could respond to either threat axis. The Cherokee warriors integrated seamlessly into this tactical arrangement, their intimate knowledge of the terrain complementing the soldiers' formal military training. When Bishop's force reached the clearing before the council ground, they halted just beyond effective rifle range. The leader raised a white flag of parley, a cynical gesture given his history of deception and massacre. A delegation approaches. Under flag of truce, Charlotte reported to the colonel, Bishop and 2 lieutenants. Likely a distraction while their eastern force maneuvers, Colonel Harrington assessed. Nevertheless, we'll honor the protocol. Captain Williams, assemble honor guard. Chief Sequoia, would you join our reception party? The formal meeting took place at a carefully selected position that offered the defenders clear fields of fire, while preventing the parley group from gaining useful intelligence about defensive arrangements. Charlotte remained on her observation ridge, recording every detail while maintaining vigilance on the eastern approach. Bishop's physical presence proved more imposing than Charlotte had registered during the chaotic wagon train massacre. Standing, over 6 feet tall with the muscular build of a professional fighter, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to instilling fear. His European origins manifested in subtle ways: his formal posture, the precision of his gestures, the quality of his weather-beaten but clearly tailored clothing. "Colonel Harrington," Bishop greeted with exaggerated courtesy, his accent confirming French origin. "I'm surprised to find federal troops interfering in what is simply a territorial matter of fugitive pursuit." "And what fugitive would that be, monsieur?" the colonel inquired with matching formality, deliberately using the French honorific. Bishop's eyes narrowed slightly at this cultural recognition. "A young woman who witnessed a regrettable incident involving renegade elements. My employer merely wishes to ensure her proper care and return to civilization." "How interesting," Colonel Harrington replied, "particularly since no official report of survivors from the Granite Mountain massacre was ever filed with territorial authorities." This verbal sparring continued while Charlotte maintained her vigilant observation. Through the spyglass, she detected subtle movement in the eastern forest, Bishop's hidden force adjusting position for better attacking angle. She dispatched a Cherokee runner with this intelligence, watching with approval as defensive adjustments occurred without obvious visible movement that might alert the parley group. The diplomatic charade concluded with Bishop delivering what amounted to an ultimatum disguised as concern. "I sympathize with the colonel's commitment to duty, but must insist that any survivors of frontier incidents be placed in appropriate custody. This tribal encampment is no place for a vulnerable young woman, particularly one whose mental state may be compromised by trauma." As the parley group withdrew to their main force, Two Hawks joined Charlotte on the observation ridge. "He recognized you," the medicine man stated. "Even at this distance, his eyes found you." Charlotte nodded, suppressing a shiver despite the morning sun's growing warmth. "He knows exactly who I am, not just witness to the massacre, but Bourbon descendant. The way he said appropriate custody confirmed it." "They will attack within the hour," Two Hawks predicted. "Sun at higher position will be in our defenders' eyes." Bishop chooses his moment with soldiers' understanding. Charlotte made these observations in her journal, then asked the question that had troubled her throughout the confrontation's development. "Why not simply withdraw? The Covenant evidence has been documented, my testimony recorded. We could all relocate to the territorial capital, where greater forces could ensure safety." Two Hawks considered her question with characteristic thoughtfulness. Sometimes evil must be confronted directly, not merely evaded. Les enfants would continue hunting royal bloodlines, continue manipulating conflicts between settlers and tribes. The cycle must be broken, not merely escaped. He handed her a small leather pouch. "Keep Covenant tobacco close. When battle begins, remember ceremonial offering to 4 directions." The anticipated attack came with the calculated precision Two Hawks had predicted. As the sun reached position to disadvantage the defenders facing west, Bishop's main force charged toward the council ground, while their eastern contingent emerged from forest cover in coordinated assault. What they couldn't anticipate was how thoroughly their strategy had been compromised by Charlotte's observations and Two Hawks' spiritual insights. The defenders had repositioned to neutralize the solar disadvantage, while concealed riflemen targeted the Eastern Forces' leadership with devastating first volleys. Charlotte recorded the battle's progress with unflinching detail: the initial charge, the carefully orchestrated defense, the moment when Bishop realized his carefully planned assault had encountered not unprepared tribal encampment, but coordinated military response. When the attackers faltered under unexpected resistance, Colonel Harrington ordered counterattack, Cherokee warriors and federal soldiers moving with surprising cohesion to exploit the tactical advantage. Charlotte watched Bishop's expression transform from confident aggression to dawning concern as his forces sustained mounting casualties without making significant penetration of the defensive perimeter. Following Two Hawks' instruction, Charlotte removed the sacred tobacco from its ceremonial pouch, offering pinches toward each cardinal direction while whispering the Cherokee prayer he had taught her. The ritual centered her awareness amid the chaos of battle, connecting present conflict to historical covenant and future resolution. As the engagement's momentum shifted decisively against the attackers, Bishop made unexpected tactical decision, disengaging his main force while personally leading a small group of riders in direct charge toward Charlotte's observation position. The maneuver revealed his true priority: not conquest of the council ground, but elimination of the royal descendant whose existence threatened centuries of Les Enfants operations. Two Hawks recognized the threat immediately. "They come for you," he stated without emotion. "Colonel's forces cannot redirect quickly enough to intercept." Charlotte felt momentary panic followed by strange clarity. Her months of wilderness, survival, Two Hawks' teachings, and newly awakened ancestral memories converged in this crucial moment. "Then we face them ourselves," she declared, drawing Mr. Holloway's hunting knife alongside the ceremonial blade Two Hawks had presented her during their journey. The medicine man nodded approval at her resolute stance, retrieving a hidden rifle. From beneath ceremonial robes, "Your royal ancestors faced revolution with courage," he observed. "Your Cherokee allies face annihilation with dignity. You honor both bloodlines by standing your ground." The small rise where they had established observation post offered defensible position. Clear sight lines, limited approach routes, elevation advantage. Charlotte and Two Hawks prepared to make their stand, as Bishop and 5 hardened fighters charged toward them, abandoning the larger battle to focus on their society's ancient vendetta. "Take the journal," Charlotte instructed a young Cherokee messenger who had remained as communication link. "Ensure it reaches Colonel Harrington if we fall." The boy accepted this responsibility with solemn dignity, disappearing into concealment as Bishop's group approached firing range. Two Hawks positioned himself with practiced efficiency, sighting his rifle at the approaching riders. "Remember teachings," he told Charlotte calmly. "Between heartbeats is moment of perfect stillness. In that moment, all possibilities exist." His rifle cracked with devastating precision, unseating Bishop's rightmost rider. The charging group faltered momentarily, clearly not expecting accurate fire from what they had assessed as undefended observation post. Charlotte found herself moving with unexpected confidence, positioning for defensive advantage rather than retreating in fear. When a second rider approached within throwing distance, she recalled Two Hawks' lessons in knife techniques. Not as conscious memory, but as embodied knowledge flowing through muscle and reflex. Her thrown blade struck with shocking accuracy, embedding in the attacker's shoulder and disrupting his aim as he fired wildly toward their position. Two Hawks' second shot found another rider, reducing the assault force by half within moments. Bishop himself, however, continued his charge with single-minded determination, his focus fixed on Charlotte with an intensity that transcended tactical calculation. This wasn't merely operational objective, but personal crusade, the culmination of his society's generations-long vendetta against escaped royalty. When his horse fell to Two Hawks' third shot, Bishop continued on foot, dual pistols drawn, firing with remarkable accuracy despite his movement. One bullet grazed Charlotte's arm, tearing fabric and drawing blood without striking bone or artery. Temporary setback, Bishop dismissed. We have endured for generations, eliminating royal bloodlines across continents. Your death will simply be another milestone in our sacred mission. As he raised his pistol for killing shot, Charlotte felt time slow around her, the moment of perfect stillness two hawks had described. In that expanded awareness, she perceived not just immediate tactical situation, but historical context extending centuries backward and forward. The arbitrary cruelty of revolution that had destroyed her ancestors, the systematic oppression of Cherokee people whose sacred covenant had protected her bloodline, the potential future where such cycles of vengeance and persecution might finally end. Her hand moved with precision that startled even her, throwing her remaining knife with fluid accuracy, born of wilderness necessity and awakened genetic memory. The blade struck Bishop's wrist, disrupting his aim as the pistol discharged harmlessly skyward. Before the French assassin could recover, riders crested the ridge behind him. Colonel Harrington leading a contingent of soldiers responding to the observation post's peril. Bishop found himself suddenly surrounded, his mission unaccomplished, his forces defeated across the broader battlefield. Michel Fouchard, also known as Bishop, Colonel Harrington announced formally, you are under arrest for murder, conspiracy, and violation of territorial law. Your operations against both settlers and native peoples end today. The colonel personally secured the prisoner, while medical personnel attended to Hawke's wound. Charlotte watched this resolution with complex emotions, vindication and relief, intermingled with somber recognition of all that had been sacrificed to reach this moment. Your path continues beyond this victory, Two Hawks told her, as a Cherokee healer applied medicine to his injury. Bridge between worlds needs constant maintenance, constant vigilance. The aftermath unfolded with greater significance than Charlotte could have anticipated. Colonel Harrington's thorough investigation revealed Bishop's network extended into territorial government, banking institutions, and even federal Indian agencies. Agents of les enfants strategically positioned to manipulate frontier conflicts. For generations, more profound was the diplomatic transformation triggered by documented proof of the Royal Cherokee Covenant. European governments, particularly France's constitutional monarchy, established after revolutionary excesses, expressed formal interest in the historical arrangement. International observers arrived to witness treaty negotiations, elevating Cherokee land claims from territorial dispute to diplomatic incident, requiring Washington's direct attention. 2 weeks after the battle, Charlotte stood with Two Hawks and Chief Sequoia as the Territorial Commissioner signed revised treaty terms that protected core Cherokee homelands from forced removal. The document explicitly referenced historical covenants with European interests that territorial authorities lacked jurisdiction to override. That evening, as celebration fires burned throughout the council ground, Charlotte sat with Two Hawks on the same observation ridge, where they had faced death together. His wound was healing well under combined care of Cherokee medicine and the military surgeon's treatments, appropriate symbol of worlds converging rather than conflicting. What happens now? Charlotte asked, watching stars emerge above ancient pines. Bishop is imprisoned, but Les Enfants still exists across continents, and I'm still caught between worlds, not fully Boston society daughter, not European royal, not Cherokee tribal member. Two Hawks considered the night sky thoughtfully. Bridge stands between shores, belonging to neither, serving both. Your strength comes precisely from not being fully claimed by any single world. He produced a small bundle wrapped in ceremonial buckskin. Cherokee Council recognizes your blood covenant. This medicine bundle contains symbols of that recognition. Eagle, feather representing royal ancestry, white stone from council ground representing tribal alliance, sacred herbs connecting both to land that sustains all people. Charlotte accepted this powerful acknowledgement with appropriate reverence. And what of my royal connections? Colonel Harrington mentioned diplomatic inquiries from European capitals. Some journeys circle back to beginnings, Two Hawks replied. Your mother's family in Boston maintained correspondence with royal relatives in Europe. These connections, dormant for your lifetime, reawaken now through your courage. He pointed toward the council ground where Colonel Harrington conversed with the State Department representative. American government now recognizes value of your unique position. They will offer diplomatic role, official recognition of status that connects Cherokee treaty rights to international obligations. This assessment proved precisely accurate. The following day, Charlotte received formal communication from Washington, offering appointment as special diplomatic liaison to tribal nations, position created specifically to leverage her unique standing between Native communities, American government, and European diplomatic circles. The journey that had begun with desperate flight from a massacred wagon train now culminated in unprecedented opportunity to heal divisions between worlds that had defined her existence. The half-frozen survivor discovered in a canyon had emerged as essential bridge between civilizations that had forgotten their historical interconnections. 6 months later, Charlotte Blackwood, now officially recognized by both American government and French diplomatic corps as Charlotte Blackwood Bourbon, returned to the canyon where Two Hawks had first found her. The spring transformation had rendered the landscape nearly unrecognizable. Barren winter stone, now adorned with wildflowers and flowing streams. Her small expedition included Two Hawks, federal cartographers documenting tribal territorial claims, and European observers, verifying historical covenant sites. Together, they performed ceremony at the cave that had preserved her life during those desperate months of solitary survival. In Cherokee understanding, places hold memory, Two Hawks explained to the assembled officials as Charlotte placed ceremonial offerings at the cave entrance. This humble shelter preserved royal bloodline when all other protections failed. Its significance extends beyond one woman's survival to renewal of ancient covenant between peoples. Charlotte stood at the threshold between wilderness refuge and spring sunshine, embodying the convergence of seemingly contradictory identities. Boston merchant's daughter, European royal descendant, adopted ally of Cherokee nation, and newly appointed American diplomat. The trauma that had driven her into solitary hiding had transformed through gradual awakening into opportunity for unprecedented bridge building between divided worlds. The strongest trees grow not in sheltered gardens, but on wind-swept ridges, Two Hawks observed as they departed the canyon. Their roots reach deeper, their trunks grow more resilient. You were such a sapling when I found you, bent by storm but not broken, tested by isolation but not defeated. Charlotte surveyed the path ahead, not just the physical journey back to the council ground, but the diplomatic mission that would soon take her to Washington, then European capitals, then tribal gatherings across the frontier. Each step would build upon the foundation established through her unlikely survival and even more improbable awakening to her true heritage. The royal courts of Europe and Boston drawing rooms seem foreign to me now, she admitted. After living in wilderness and learning Cherokee ways, I'm not certain I belong in those formal societies anymore. Two Hawks' weathered face revealed rare smile. You belong precisely in the uncomfortable spaces between worlds. That discomfort is not weakness, but awareness, not confusion, but potential for transformation. He gestured toward distant mountains, where snow still kept highest peaks despite valley springtime. Boundaries between seasons, between ecosystems, between peoples, these transition zones always contain greatest diversity, greatest adaptation, greatest possibility for new creation. As they rejoined their expedition, Charlotte fingered the Bavadi's star-shaped birthmark that had defined her destiny without her knowledge for 19 years. What once had been hidden shame, covered by proper hairstyles and social convention, now represented acknowledged strength and responsibility. The half-frozen survivor had not merely endured, but emerged as essential catalyst for healing historical wounds. "Remember always," Two Hawks counseled as they rode toward future responsibilities. "You survived not merely to witness old injustice, but to create new possibility. The covenant renewed through your courage now extends beyond two bloodlines, to potential peace between divided worlds." Charlotte Blackwood Bourbon, the lone survivor of Wagon Massacre, found half-frozen in a canyon, rode forward into spring sunshine, no longer defined by what she had escaped, but by what she would help create. The royal past revealed by Cherokee, Medicine Man had transformed from burden of secrecy into foundation for unprecedented bridge building between worlds that had forgotten their ancient interconnections. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.